Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Today, I'm joined by Dalmo Cirne, who's joining us from Denver, Colorado, and we're going to be talking about his concept of the four streams of leadership and how that can turn you into an overachieving manager. Dalmo, welcome to the Coaching Conversation.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I am looking forward to our conversation.
Dalmo, for the audience, give a sense of your story. How have you gone through a successful corporate career? Now you're an author, now you're a coach. How did this all come about?
Perhaps luck. Um, you know, uh, throughout most of my professional life, I have been an individual contributor. And at some point, I wanted to build something that was bigger than myself, more than I could do just by myself. And to do that, you need help. You need other people. You can't go and tell people what to do. That doesn't end well. True leadership has to be legitimate. You have to show something worth building. Um, then I had to make the transition into leadership and management, and I struggled tremendously because it's a different set of skills. The expectations are different. You need to know a whole new set of things you didn't know before. Um, then, of course, I came across the Peter Principle, the book written by Lawrence Peter in 1969. And the argument was you get promoted to your level of incompetence. I'm oversimplifying. I'm not doing justice to the book. It's an excellent book, but just for the sake of this argument, and what I'm proposing is you don't become incompetent. You don't spend your professional life as a competent and good professional only to wake up one fine day and find out, hey, I'm incompetent. No, a better framing is you're unprepared. Now, what can be done about that? Being incompetent is a much harder problem to solve. Being unprepared is reachable, right? You can do something about it. So like, what is expected of me? What is the domain I'm working with? That was the idea of the book came about and the framework that I developed around that, right? And many people say that you write to learn. So one of the
Yeah,
motivations
yeah.
that came, like putting ideas to paper, came from how do I become better? How do I improve myself? And along the way, I was taking notes, putting on paper. Eventually, that became a book. So I learned from the book, even though I was writing it. And my hope is more people can prepare themselves to go into a position of leadership and not be another statistics of the Peter Principle.
So when you're working with your clients and you're sharing this with them, what are the problems that they're typically trying to solve?
There are two main categories. Let's put this way. The first one is you are in a smaller company or a startup company. There is not really a formal program for training people, for teaching them the ropes, and you kind of struggle a little bit more on that scenario. In larger companies, you do have a established training program. At least it's typical to have established training program, but that is overfit for that company. You can argue if overfit is the right option or not, but the company, they have a purpose, they have a reason to operate that way. So it is understandable that that scenario is overfit for that company. But either or scenario, you are falling short in good leadership, right? So problems that people find is those are not the CEO or the C-suite level kind of people who I am working with and whose message I'm speaking to. The people are like recent managers. You transition from an individual contributor into management. What do I do? You feel unprepared. You feel lack of familiarity with the tasks. You are somewhat lost. You have new managers who have been in the role for a little while but are struggling, right? They say, hey, I found these couple of things that work for me, but in the whole, it's not really working. You have managers of managers, right? So if you are one level above and you're managing managers, you want to have your team to be productive, to get better, and to go one level above. Last but not least, you have students who want to go beyond academic coursework and already hit the ground running and know something more practical that they can apply. So those are things that I have observed in working with people, problems that they feel, and the profile of the audience I'm working with, I'm speaking to. Those are the big picture of where the book falls into.
Can you tell us then, can you give us a better insight into what you see are the four streams of leadership?
The first, let's say, impulse you have is coming from being an individual contributor, landing into management, and you think, oh, I have to manage my team and I have to manage my projects. Those are natural impulses. And you focus all your attention in those areas, but then it comes at the detriment of everything else that you have to do, right? Managing the team, managing the projects, those are insufficient to be a good leader, to be a good manager. So you need to expand the scope of your work and the things you pay attention to, the people you communicate with, in order to really be fulfilling that role that was given to you, right? The role of a manager, the role of a leader. And that's why I split the framework into four different directions. The idea is there is a constant flow of tasks coming your way, just like a perennial river. So those are like streams, right? So the four streams of leadership is like the things you need to be dealing with on a regular basis. And it all begins with yourself. That's the reservoir, that's the first stream. What are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What are the core values I will establish to the team? How do I manage my time? How do I do delegation? Even what tasks are good candidates to be delegated? The second stream is the downstream. That was the first impulse I was mentioning, but it's not only team projects, but you also have operations that you have to manage. The third stream, and that's where there's a lot of historical problems happening in that stream, is managing upstream. You're not really telling your manager what to do, but there are lots of conversations that need to take place. You need to inform them, you need to work with them so the decisions they make have all the information, all the data that they need, and the context that you have to make the right decision. Last but not least, you have managing side stream. And those are your peers, people from different teams where you do need to work with them in order to come up with successful products and services. For example, legal team, right? Are there compliances that you have to, well, to comply with? uh, the marketing team, where's the message that you're going to come up forward with the product? The sales team, how do you demo? How do you present the product on the best light? And the list goes on and on. So you break it down in those four streams and you go deep into each one of them. Now you have a bigger picture of, well, this is what I'm expected to do, and here's how you do those things. That's where put yourself in a position to be a more successful leader.
So if you're helping someone to understand it, whether it's effectively a new manager or a manager who's struggling to cope with the change, how do you introduce this? How do you show them? Do you give them examples? Do you work through their time allocations? How do you do that?
That's an awesome question. One thing that I have in the book and I like to work with is with practical examples that you can apply today. What you see in many books on leadership, and especially the ones talking to the C-suite level, is you come with a story. There's a beautiful story. It's entertaining, and you're like, great. I read that story about a lonely unicorn who lived in the highlands of Scotland and didn't have lollipops. And it's a very compelling, wonderful story. But in the end, you're like, how do I connect to that to my life? How do I apply this as an example? Unless you have the same life experiences, sorry, unless you have the same life experiences as the author of the book, you're never going to be able to connect the dots and you're never going to read those stories again. My approach was different. Can we come up with examples, as you were just suggesting? Can we come up with examples that you apply on a day to day? For instance, I printed an image over here that is in a book. For people only listening to this podcast, I'm going to describe this is a series of boxes representing steps in a process, and each of the steps leads to the next. At the very end, you have how a CPU in a computer executes instructions. So basically, you have to go fetch instructions, prepare them to be executed, and go and execute them. How do we apply that to our day-to-day? Well, it's simple. Not so simple. It's easier said than done, but it is doable. Everyone usually works with a backlog of tasks to do. You have a project, you come up with the structure for that project, create tasks, and those tasks go in a backlog. People talk about working smarter, not harder, but those are empty calories advice. How do you actually apply those? Let's go back to the backlog. Are all the tasks in the backlog ready to be implemented? In that same figure I was showing, if an instruction is not ready to be executed by the CPU, that's called a cache miss. The CPU says, oh, you're not ready, I have to go and fetch a new set of instructions, and it's very slow. It affects the performance of the computer. The same thing applies to teams. If the tasks in a backlog are scheduled to be worked in that period of time, but they're not ready, what happens? It's like, hey, I have to spend time chasing people, getting more details, preparing the task to be worked on. That slows everyone down. Imagine that you have back of the envelope calculations. Have 40 a year has 52 weeks. Imagine that you have 40 solid productive weeks in a year. We're removing holidays, time off, and whatnot. So just to do a back of the envelope calculation. 40 solid weeks of work. Now, if your backlog is slowing you down and making you chase tasks, chase people, not being ready to work, instead, if you prepare those tasks and have them ready to work, people will get them and execute. Let's say very conservatively that you get a 10% gain in productivity over there. Now you're going from 40 to 44 tasks that you completed in a year. If you are a startup company, that could be that you are releasing more features than the competition, and that's what keeps you in the market. If you are a long-established company, you are releasing products that are ahead of your competition. You're becoming more relevant, and you stay less behind compared to more agile companies. So without having to ask anyone to work harder or longer, you just improve the productivity of an entire team by focusing on the work that you have on the backlog and making sure that those tasks are ready to be implemented. So that is one way where you can improve the productivity, is something doable, and the results speak for themselves.
And when you're working with clients and people who are moving into this particular leadership position for the first time, does the culture of the organization have any impact on that?
It does. It definitely does, because culture hates a vacuum. If you don't establish the culture, it will be established for you. Same thing with habits and so on. So, the same way the good culture can be established, the bad culture can be established as well. Going and understanding what is the culture of the place and figuring out how do we remove elements that are undesirable and implement elements that are desirable, that does have an impact. But culture has a different meaning on for each person, right? But culture is definitely not, we have a ping pong table, we go out for a pizza and beer. That is not culture. I like to say culture, and I'm oversimplifying over here, but culture is what happens when you're not in the room. Are the correct decisions being made? Are the right people stepping forward and doing what needs to be done? Right? If you establish an environment where though you can check those boxes, you have a good culture.
And does the size of an organization, whether it's a new manager managing two or three people and he's got only one or two bosses above him or her, does compared to say an enormous organization where they inherit a large team, and then they have a supervisor as a manager as a director, and there's an enormous size. Does that make much difference?
It is a both yes and no. Right. Good leadership is independent of size of the company. You have iconic leaders out there without naming names, but each person can pick their favorite ones. And usually those iconic ones are from larger companies. By definition, those larger companies will have several layers of management. At the same time, if you have many layers of management, the higher you are, the worse is your visibility into the resolution of the day-to-day tasks. There is a mathematical it's not a problem, but it's a mathematical approach for measuring distance to how far stars are from planet Earth, and uses the parallax effect. Parallax is very easy for you to simulate. Imagine you put your finger in front of your eyes and you cover one of the eyes, see where the finger is. Now you cover the other eye, and the finger, you have the impression it has moved. It didn't move actually, but it's just your perception. That distance of the apparent movement of the finger is called the parallax. And by that distance, you can calculate how far the observer is from the object being observed. Coincidentally, I wrote an article about the parallax effect in leadership. If you are the first level of management, you're very close to the day to day and you have full visibility. The farther you are in the corporation, the hierarchy of the corporation, that distance makes you have a smaller and smaller resolution of the problems, right? That's why one of the very important streams is upstream, to communicate upstream what the situation actually is. You don't have to communicate everything. That would be too much information, but you do have to communicate the key pieces of information, right? Is exactly to mitigate that parallax effect. I can send you the link to the article so you can put in the show notes.
And thank you. And if an organization is much larger and has much more layers of management and the parallax is larger, do you find that that's harder or what for incoming new managers?
It shouldn't be, right? Because if you look at the absolute number of layers, that is misleading because a company is segmented into different areas. And you don't have infinite layers of management in each one of the areas, even though overall the company may have a very large number. So, whichever area the person is working in, they will have a limited, not too many layers of management. So, decisions can be made within that segment of the company. You don't have to have all the decisions going to the CEO and coming back. That would be impossible to run a larger company like that. So even though on paper the number of layers may be very large, in practice they're not, right? You segment the company, you compartmentalize the company so you can have effective decision making going forward.
Okay. And how long do you think it takes using the four streams methodology for a new manager to become comfortable, to become competent? How many months, years does it take for them to apply these and master the new role?
That is a question that will depend per person. Like each person will have a different pace. They will be at different stages in their lives. They will be absorbing information and applying them at different rates. But in every lesson on the book, there is a practical exercise you can apply pretty much today. So it's up to you. If you devour the book and you start applying the lessons, the results may start coming very quickly. If you're taking a little longer and you need to catch up with other things, then it may take a little longer. It will vary per person, but for someone really committed, you will, as you read the book, you don't have to finish it. You can start applying the lessons as you progress through its pages.
So would that be 3 months, would you say, roughly?
How fast can you finish the first chapter, right? That would be, it could be as early as 1 week.
Right. Okay. Um, do you find that the lessons in the four streams do they last the test of time, or do you find that once managers get comfortable, they develop other tools or they develop other styles, or is it the sort of thing that this is now their blueprint for success?
Everyone tries to produce a piece of work that is timeless. And the sensitivity to time is something I consider very deeply in writing the four streams of leadership. Even myself, I find consulting the book, even though I wrote it, but I go and, oh, how did I do that again? That is the kind of book for you to keep on your desk, not on the bookshelf, right? Because it's a reference material that you can keep going back and say, oh, I need to write a letter to my manager upstream communicating this. How do I do that again? Where's the template? And you go there and you can see the example. You can put in your own words and forward it. So, as much as possible, it's a book to be timeless. However, not all lessons apply to everyone. At some point, you start progressing in your career. Some of the lessons may be less applicable to you. If you got the book as a first entry level manager, eventually fast forward and you have a successful career, you get the CEO. Some of the lessons will be done by other people, not by you, but you will know how to interpret the information that you get from what you've learned from the book, right? So even though you may not be executing or operate being the operator on those lessons, but you'll be going to be on the consumer side and you're going to understand, oh yeah, this is why I need this information.
And for you, Dalmo, what gives you the most satisfaction from the work that you do?
It's paying it forward. It's seeing people being successful. When If you're building a product, you want to see the product being released and people using that, training people, enabling them to be successful and actually see the transformation taking place. And now they are effective in the work that they do and grow and progress in that. There's no bigger reward than that.
Fantastic. Dalmo, thank you for your time. I've enjoyed our conversation. If any of the audience want to find out more, or they want to find out more about you, where can they do that?
Here's an invitation to everyone. Go to dalmocirne.com. It's spelled DALMOCIRNE.com. And there you can find links to all my social networks. You can find a place where you can schedule an appointment, a conversation with me. You can send me a message. I reply to all messages. That's a good place to start a conversation or to continue this conversation.
Dalmo, thank you for your time. It's been great chatting with you. So that's it for this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye.